the numbers are a little bit stagnant right now, so I think I'm going to go ahead and just quickly introduce. So right now we have 4 additional agency representatives who are going to just give some quick introductions about themselves, their agencies, and some relevant resources that their agency provides for landowners or communities to help us collectively or individually prepare for upcoming wildfire seasons, or just generally be more prepared for these wildfire events that are continually occurring. So we'll have quick introductions from them, and then we'll open it up to questions. We're going to try to use the hand raise icon or chats. And then we have some moderators that are going to be filtering through the questions to see if there's some common themes coming up. And we'll try it that way and see how it goes. So I'm going to introduce, I think we're going to start with you, Jim, from Wildfire Partners. And I'll just quickly tell you who is presenting. So Jim Webster is with Boulder County Wildfire Partners. And then we're also going to have Ben Foll, who's the Supervisory Forester for the Colorado State Forest Service. And Jesse Olson is with the Left Hand Watershed Center. And Justin Butarak is the Deputy Director of the Boulder Office of Emergency Management. So, Jim, let's start with you.
Thanks, Maya. So I'm Jim Webster. I'm the Wildfire Partners Program Coordinator for Boulder County. And Wildfire Partners is the county's program to help landowners prepare for wildfire. So we launched the program in 2014. And we have over 2,400 participants. So hope some people on this call are current members of Wildfire Partners, or some of you have also heard about the program. You know, it's a complex program with many components. I'm not going to go into every detail right now, but we'll have a chance with some question and answers to get some of your questions answered about the program. We do have a website, wildfirepartners.org, with lots of information. We have a hotline and an email address there. We have a staff. I'm not going to introduce or mention all of our staff, but Leslie Broadhead is one of our program specialists. We have wildfire mitigation specialists, Kyle McCaddy and Abby Silver. So we have a team that is here to help residents prepare for wildfire. You apply online at that wildfirepartners.org website. It's an application process. One of the core features of the program is a one-on-one site assessment with one of our wildfire mitigation specialists. These are knowledgeable professionals, former fire chiefs, former district foresters, PhDs. They understand fire. They've been doing this for most of them 7 or 8 years, where they've done hundreds of assessments. They'll come to your property, answer your questions, look at your specific vulnerabilities, take pictures, and you'll get a customized report with a checklist of items that you can tackle. Mitigation takes time, takes money, so you need an action plan. You need to work smart, not just hard. So Wildfire Partners is there to assist you, provide that technical assistance during that on-site assessment, and then follow-up. Big thing about mitigation is it doesn't happen once. It's an ongoing process. We mitigate for as long as we are in our homes, preparing for wildfire in advance before the smoke is in the air. That's the idea. Is we work every day on mitigation. The idea is to support those homeowners doing mitigation. So you'll have that individualized custom report with Wildfire Partners. Then we have a list of resources for contractors to do work. We have financial assistance if we have grant funding available. So depending on the year, we are able to offer some financial assistance in addition to this technical assistance I mentioned. We come back and perform an independent inspection. So if you perform mitigation, complete your checklist, we offer a certificate and a yard sign. That's the recognition portion of the program. So happy to answer questions later, but we have a program in place to help residents prepare for wildfire. To do the mitigation, we start with the home, hardening the home, creating the defensible space, and talking about emergency preparedness. So part of Partners, and Justin will talk more about this later, so I won't go into details, but talking to each individual about their evacuation plans, plans for their pets, So we focus mostly on working on that individual home property, but we also really encourage participants to work with their neighbors, to link defensible space, to talk to their neighbors in advance, to coordinate this preparation. So there's a lot of aspects to preparing for wildfire. Wildfire Partners is here to help on many of those components, and look forward to the question and answer session.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, Ben.
Thank you, Maya. I'm gonna try to share my screen here in a second.
Okay.
So I'll jump into it.
Okay.
Ben Full, Colorado State Forester, or State Forest Service. I'm the supervisory forester at our Boulder field office. The Colorado State Forest Service is unique in the nation, or somewhat unique in the fact that we're one of the few land grant state forestry agencies tied to a land grant university. So what that means for you is that we're primarily a service and outreach agency. Try to share my screen here. Our mission is stewardship of Colorado's diverse forest ecosystems. So I'm going to try to share our website here. Are you seeing the Colorado Forest Atlas? Great, okay. So Maya had asked me to share our Colorado Forest Atlas. It's a newer tool that we have. It's an online portal from our agency for individuals and communities to access some data and assessments that have been done. I'm going to point out the three different applications here. The first one I'm going to point out is the Forest Action Plan. So every state in our nation has to have a forest action plan that's mandated by Congress. And we just updated our Forest Action Plan this year, just was released within the last month. I'm going to launch the app here. So anybody can visit this site, and the Forest Action Plan is an assessment of our state's forests, but it's broken out on 6 key themes. The map you see here is all the data aggregated to watersheds. So one thing I'll point out is you will not see property boundaries in this, and I think this is important because Angie G with the Forest Service referred to this in her presentation, that fires and disturbances don't respect property boundaries. So the Forest Action Plan has 6 themes, which you can read about online. The map shows priorities, or watersheds as priorities. I can't go into all the themes today, but I would encourage you to visit this website and read about it. See if I can get to the bottom here. The actual, of course, it's not going to work for me right now. The actual plan itself, if you want to learn more and read about it, you can go to our website and read through the plan. The Forest Action Plan is not meant to direct where you should do certain activities or certain treatments. It's helped to drill down within the state where there's high priority treatments that can be done, where the highest priority watersheds are. For those of you that are used to our what we used to call our Colorado Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal, that has moved now to our Colorado Forest Atlas, and is now the Wildfire Risk Viewer. I'm not going to go into how all of this data was arrived at. You can read about all the data that went into produce these risk maps. But in this portal, you're able to click in or enter in your property address, get a map, and get a risk rating. And then the other application on this portal is meant more for community planning. And this was also a feature that used to be in our Wildfire Risk Assessment Portal. Again, it's an online mapping tool meant for communities to develop plans. A lot of our communities and fire protection districts within the county have community wildfire protection plans. This is a tool that can help to update those and improve those. So these are the 3 tools that I want to show you online. Maya had asked me to share this, but one thing for the group to know is the State Forest Service, I mentioned we're part of a land-grant university. Colorado is unique in that we don't have any state forests. So in my job, I do not go out to state land and manage forests. We do provide forest management on state parks, but what that means for you is that we spend all of our time working with communities and private landowners. And we've got a slew of programs to help people achieve their goals, including a lot of grant opportunities.
Thanks, Ben.
Yep.
Okay, I see some questions coming up and I will come back to them. I just wanted to let you know, we're going to continue on with Jesse Olson at the Left Hand Watershed Center.
Hey everyone, thanks Maya. I'm Jesse Olson, the Executive Director with the Left Hand Watershed Center, and we're a nonprofit stakeholder-driven organization that works to protect and restore watersheds for people and the environment using a science-based and collaborative approach. And we have been helping coordinate as the lead coordinating entity of the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership. And I'm going to send a link for you guys to check it out on our website. But basically what this is it's a collaborative group of stakeholders and agencies and landowner representatives that live within the St. Vrain watershed, which includes Left Hand Creek and St. Vrain Creek. And we've been working together to collaboratively plan future forest health projects. So when the Calwood and Left Hand fires actually ignited, we had just finished a plan to collaborate across the landscape and basically to plan forest health projects across this watershed. And then the fire happened. And so we've been able to kind of utilize that partnership to be able to help coordinate the fire recovery efforts as well. Like Angie very was well spoken about in terms of the fire just knows no boundaries in terms of property ownership. That is really the point of the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership, and the collaboration is to work across those cross-jurisdictional boundaries to be able to better plan and mitigate for future fire risk. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please reach out. I'm happy to keep you updated on our, we have monthly newsletters, etc. So happy to share more as we learn more. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. And last but not least is Justin with the Boulder Office of Emergency Management.
Thanks, Maya. Appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Justin Pikartek. I'm with the Boulder Office of Emergency Management. We are a joint Boulder County and City of Boulder office. And really what our organization does is help prepare and respond to large-scale disasters. So kind of your average day-to-day sort of emergencies usually don't hit our radar, but obviously the Calwood fire and the Left Hand Canyon fire got our attention. And usually we're pretty late to the dance. We will get notified, sometimes an hour, 2 hours, potentially 3 hours after an incident. Ironically, we were in our Emergency Operations Center Saturday morning doing some planning around potential impacts from the Cameron Peak fire in Larimer County when someone ran from across the hall from our 911 dispatch center to inform us that we had a 1-acre fire that just started outside of the Calwood area. And Chris and Seth did a good job of kind of walking everybody through kind of what that looked like. I just want to spend a few minutes before we open it up and talk about kind of what that notification initial public warning piece looks like, talk through evacuation planning, both how it happens on the ground and what you as residents can do to prepare, and then also reentry or repopulation, the opportunity for you to go back into your homes. So just to really talk about how an incident progresses, I'm not going to repeat what Chris and Seth discussed, but when you do have an incident command set up and you have first responders kind of, doing tactical operations, a decision will be made that we need to evacuate a certain area. That is then communicated to one of our 911 dispatch centers. So the county has its own dispatch center, as does the city of Longmont, and the city of Boulder and CU actually has its own as well. So for Wildfire, that communication was made from the boots on the ground to the 911 dispatch center, who then uses a system called Everbridge, which is commonly referred to as reverse notification or reverse 911, to push out evacuation warnings and evacuation orders to our residents based on where the fire behavior is projected to go based on analysis on the ground. What we do as emergency management is to set up our emergency operations center. And we do not do tactical operations by any means. What we do is do support and coordination around large-scale community impacts or consequences. And so around evacuation specifically, three big things that we want to coordinate is A, public information. So allowing residents to understand what area is and is not impacted. We want to update our public information map, which is on our website. I'll do a quick overview of that at the end here. And we want to make sure we're communicating any potential sheltering sites. That could be both human and animal. And we utilize, just talking public warning in general, a variety of systems. We call it a system of systems. So I already mentioned Everbridge, which is that reverse notification system that our 911 dispatchers use to notify residents. Now, the shortfall of Everbridge is that we don't hit 100% of our population in an impacted area. Everbridge is an opt-in sort of program, and we definitely encourage everybody to opt in. But unless you are on a landline telephone, which automatically opts you into this program, you have to actually opt in voluntarily. And you can go on our website, and I'll show you this afterwards, to go in and put your specific information in, and you have the ability to get a phone call, a text message, an email, a variety of, to ensure that you're getting notified in a timely manner. We also have outdoor warning sirens that probably many of you are aware of. And we were actually pretty close on activating two of the outdoor warning sirens, one in the town of Lyons and one in the town of Jamestown, to actually notify residents, especially those that do not have Everbridge, to potentially evacuate. We utilize the program called the Emergency Alert System. And this is something, if anyone has a NOAA weather radio and you have messages that go across the radio, warnings or advisories or things like that, that is a system that we can utilize, and we actually utilize that on Sunday for the Left Hand Canyon fire. And we definitely do very old school door-to-door knocking of residents, because we can't rely on technology to make sure that all of our residents are notified. And so we had deputies from our Boulder County Sheriff's Office actually going door to door with, along with our fire agencies, to inform residents that they were in an evacuation area and they had to leave immediately. I'm just kind of skimming the surface of some of our public warning systems that we do utilize. When it comes to actual evacuation, the way that happens is that I mentioned earlier that notification will go into a 911 dispatch center. They push out these notifications using predetermined what we call polygons. This was actually a sort of project that was put together over a span of a year to a year and a half between our dispatch center, our fire management office, and our fire communities, in the wildland urban interface, to pre-identify based on topography and access and roads and things like that. We as in the 911 dispatch center, could quickly hit these certain polygons or shapes on a map, and it would automatically notify residents. This saves a lot of time. Sometimes it's only minutes, but in the case of this fire, minutes really matter, to hit these predetermined polygons that then will notify the residents through that Everbridge system. Again, I talked about how then that coordination with the Emergency Operations Center is established, for public information, to establish an evacuation point. But which by the way is kind of a temporary location where residents can go to for information to then take some actionable follow-on guidance around. And then there's sheltering, right? So, where do you bring your livestock? Where do you bring your small animals? Where can I shelter? In this case, because congregate sheltering wasn't an option because of COVID, our Mass Care and our American Red Cross partners set up a series of hotels to support residents that were evacuated from their homes. So how can you prepare as residents? Well, it's really three things, and this is kind of what Jim was alluding to. And then we partner with Wildfire partners and other groups to really push this messaging. One is to be informed, and that's knowing how to get information, signing up for Everbridge, getting a NOAA weather radio, following us on Facebook and Twitter, us being Boulder Emergency Management. Unless you're informed, you can't really take an action before you actually know what's happening. So be informed is number one. Two is make a plan. And that plan could be an evacuation route, having 1, 2, 3, 4 different avenues to move away from an impacted area. Having plans around pets, medication, certain medical equipment. If you have access and functional needs or mobility needs, give yourself that extra time. And then the third thing is build a kit. So this doesn't have to be something that stays in a bag or in a box and you have to continually update if things expire or whatever it is. But it could be even just something as simple as a list, and making sure you're updating that list to make sure that if and when you do get that notification to evacuate, you're not scrambling at the last minute to try to determine what you actually need. And I do just want to close with reentry or repopulation. So, as soon as kind of that life safety incident stabilization phase occurs, our operators are immediately thinking about how to get residents back into their homes. And that was pretty urgent. If folks remember that we're impacted, we had a freeze coming on Friday following the fire, and folks need to get back into their homes to winterize. And so planning, coordinating between the first responder organizations, utility providers, our public information officers to push out messaging as to when we can do it. All this kind of needs to occur, and we help kind of facilitate that sort of thing. And real quick, I'm going to try to share my screen just to show everyone our website. So hopefully this shows up on your end. If not, boulderoem.com. OEM stands for Office of Emergency Management. If you have not been here, this is where one of the places we post information. Wildfire updates, our public information officers were keeping this updated constantly every 15 to 30 minutes during the height of our fires. But right down here is just the last piece where I want to draw attention, and that says emergency messages sign up. If you click this will open up in a new window, and you can create a new account. And if you do have an account and you move locations or you want to remove yourself, this is also the website where you can do that. And it's not wanting to load for me right now for some reason. Might be my slow mountain internet right now. But nonetheless, go to our website, boulderoem.com. This is where you sign up for that Everbridge reverse notification system. And then also, if you hover over the preparedness tab, or if you just click the preparedness tab, this will give you some helpful pointers around, how to make a plan, what to put in your kit, helpful hints like that. So I'll probably close right there, Maya. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Great information. And just a heads up, we will be sending out an email afterwards with links to all of these resources, so you can check them out later. So I just want to encourage you again to put your questions in the chat, or you can use the little raise your hand icon that's in the participant area. But here's a first question. Somebody asks about what kind of tree regrowth rates have been seen in previous burn areas like the Black Tiger Fire and the 4 Mile Fire area. And is tree planting now required in burn areas?
I can start that answer. So it really depends on what kind of survival there is. I mean, this fire occurred mostly in ponderosa pine and Doug fir, and so if we have survival on ridge tops and locations where there's a seed source, then those areas can come back. But there are some areas where there's not going to be the seed source. So yes, we may need to look for areas to do strategic planning and planting to allow for to occur. I would be more concerned in some of the larger fires that have occurred on the landscape in terms of in the center not having any access to a seed source. There's other species that operate differently. So anything that's in lodgepole pine, you can actually get seedlings come back fairly quickly from serotinous cones. But this is not the situation here. So that's something we will be looking into.
Thank you, Stefan. I can add to that just a little bit. I work in the 4 Mile Burn area, and we have seen very little tree regeneration in areas where all the seed sources were burned. So it definitely does depend on the burn severity and what, exactly like Stefan said, what existing trees are still there. Okay, here's another question from Edward and Paula in Lake of the Pines. They received, maybe Justin, you could think about this one. They received 2 evacuation calls, and it was confusing in that it mentioned the St. Vrain Valley and they weren't sure if it were applied to them. Could we suggest whenever possible these messages, sorry, let me get this. So I think there was, Justin, do you have any information on, I think there was one error maybe in the evacuations that went out, or could it have been a polygon that was different?
Yeah, I'm just reading it myself, Maya. So one explanation could be that residents have the ability when you sign up for Everbridge to put multiple locations. So I'm not sure if this is the spirit of the question, but if I'm a resident and I want to put in my home and then put in my work, I could potentially get 2 different notifications, one being an evacuation order and the other being an evacuation warning, which obviously could be very confusing. I know our 911 dispatch center, in the actual message that is sent out, as part of the communication, tries to be as specific as possible in the limited character requirements that they do have. I would encourage it if there were issues with anybody on this call. We're always open to feedback, and they can email us through our website, and we push that directly to our dispatch centers to make sure that if there's any one-off sorts of issues that they're addressed.
Thank you. Okay, so a resident in Mountain Ridge area who lost their home, I'm sorry to hear that, asks, what type of support can people expect in stabilizing land against erosion or landslides in the spring? Maybe, Jesse, do you want to talk maybe a little bit about the recovery process that's happening?
Yeah, sure. We were just talking about this community. We have weekly recovery team phone calls or Zoom meetings on Mondays. And so just prior to this, we were discussing with the county and the U.S. Forest Service and Left Hand Water District and all of the stakeholders, the agency stakeholders, about next steps. And one of the next steps is the county is scheduling a meeting with you. I understand there's a homeowners association meeting this week, and they'll be meeting with the folks in the Mountain Ridge community and talking about the process that we'll be working through in terms of applying for EWP funding, which could potentially provide some funding for mulching in areas that have high severity burns and have potential for debris flows. And so right now we're in the evaluation and a planning stage to determine where those treatments will be taking place throughout the entire burns landscape. And so it's not clear if it's going to be happening on Mountain Ridge yet, but just to know that there's lots of resources within the county and extension services that can help with your individual properties. And then there's this larger team looking at the whole watershed recovery effort on both a short-term standpoint and then also looking long-term at resilient measures to make sure that we're protected for future fires and also just longer-term recovery of sediment catchment zones and reduced flooding potential. So that's a little bit of an overview. Perhaps the county wants to weigh in as well.
Does anyone else want to talk about that before we move on? Okay, I'm going to ask another question about slash piles, and there's other people here, Angie or Chris O'Brien or Seth. Slash piles are always, I think, a big topic of conversation. So the question is, could the multitudes of slash piles have increased fire behavior or the burn severity in areas? And what are some of the strategies in dealing with those? And where does the responsibility lay in dealing with those as well?
Yeah, I'll pick that one up, Maya. Chris from Left Hand Fire again. So the depends on the proximity of the slash pile to a residence, really. But what you're looking at is that over time, as the slash piles break down, the availability of them in a particular fire area becomes less and less of an issue. Of course, you know, you've taken an aerial fuel and moved it to the ground. So the ideally, the best way to approach those is to burn those over time. You know, the challenge there, of course, is that we need the right conditions to be able to burn those piles. So it really depends on proximity and you know, what stage of decay the piles are in. As to how much of an effect they actually have on the fire. And I know that part of the research is going to probably take a look at some of how the fire moved in that particular area. So it'll be interesting to see what factors affected the fire movement in that particular area.
Thanks, Chris. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Hey, Maya, it's Seth McKinney. I'll kind of add on to that. You know, there have been a ton of treatments at Heil Ranch. As far as slash piles on the county properties, you know, we haven't had piles on the county property back there in a little while. Not to say that there couldn't have been any. The county has, I mean, there are plenty of slash piles out there. As Chris, you know, kind of alluded to, it really is about manpower getting back there to complete the work. You know, slash piles, it's a rearrangement of fuels. You know, you're taking the same fuel in an aerial formation and you're dropping it down to the ground. Same thing when you bring in a grinder, grind up that material, you're just rearranging the fuels. So, you know, lots of studies, you know, a lot of smarter people than me can certainly talk a lot more into it. The best way as a fire manager, you know, that Chris mentioned, is to actually get in there and go burn those piles. You know, I think another big consideration is, you know, the wind and the topography was in perfect alignment on Mountain Ridge. You know, that small, I mean, ever so slight saddle leading into Mountain Ridge coming from the west. I mean, that really focused and funneled the heat coming off that fire going that area. You know, Stefan can talk about it a little bit more, but I mean, the county just completed a tremendous fuels project on the other side of that ridge. And, you know, certainly our fuels projects, they're designed for general fire behavior, but there's no cookie cutter, you know, prescription for all kinds of fire behavior. The conditions we saw on October 17th were, I mean, I hate to say it, but extreme by all means, extreme by even the new standards of extreme. That's not fire behavior that we typically see around here. It's another case of how things are changing. So, you know, we're doing the best we can to engage where we can. One big question I get is, you know, well, when you're not out, if you're a firefighter, what are you doing when there's no fires to fight? Well, I'm doing exactly this. I'm trying to plan plan areas where I can put fire on the ground safely, to reintroduce fire into this, environment where we've removed it from our landscape for so long. And whether that's going out with a chainsaw and having Stefan tell me where to go cut, leading my crew to go cut trees and create new piles only to burn them that winter. I mean, this is a year-round job now, and our workforce is not, we've not kept up with that. We're still running off of, well, fires only burn in the summer, and so I think all fire managers are trying to change that, but it's a slow process. So I probably rambled on for a minute there, but hopefully that helps.
So talking about this extreme fire behavior, can we talk, Michael brings up in the chat a good point about fire being a necessary component of a healthy forest ecosystem. And is there anyone that could speak about the benefits of fire on the landscape? Not extreme fire like we saw, but a different type of fire.
I think we probably could all speak to it, but so, our understanding of the lower montane, so the ecosystem that we're talking about where the Calwood fire occurred, is that there is supposed to be low severity fire that goes through the landscape fairly often. And you're correct that there's the forest that exists right now is not designed to support that. So a lot of the projects that we've been working on are trying to rebuild the structure that can withstand low intensity wildfires. We're not necessarily designing it to, avoid this 90th percentile plus fire event. And so trying to build that on the landscape and then trying to follow up the treatments that we do with prescribed fire and kind of start to rebuild the process that would maintain the forest. So that is what we're working on. That is what we're trying to accomplish. I saw another question asking about, are we, starting to bring the thoughts of climate change into how we address what we're doing? And the answer is yes, we're trying to figure that out. So as we go and look at Heil Ranch and we say to ourselves, well, where are we going to replant and where do we need to replant? We're going to be thinking about, as climate is changing and as it is drier, are we going to be planting at the same levels that we want, that was there beforehand? And the answer is probably no. So we're going to try to strategically look for places that we can plant. But so, that's really what most forest managers are trying to accomplish is to change the structure so that we can let the process do what it's supposed to do.
So just to jump off of that a little bit, I think the question maybe you're referring to, Stefan, is does this new fire behavior that we're seeing mean that new fire models need to be developed?
Yeah, I guess I'll talk real briefly to that. That's tough to say. There are probably about a dozen different fuel models out there. And the assumption with modeling, there are too many various factors to accurately keep up with lifetime modeling. So I think I saw another question there on about overlapping lifetime weather into our fire prediction systems. The state has done a great job on trying to produce something like that. It is, when it first came out, it took 3 days to render a relatively small model. So to say that we're making progress on getting lifetime models, but we're still a long ways off. And so again, the problem with the assumptions that we make with all the current fuels models are that, one, that those fuels are they're consistent and they basically run forever. So a lot of really smart people have done a great job on putting samplings together and over a 1 acre plot and being able to predict fire through that one type of fuel. You know, the honest reality is we, you know, our fuels are more complex than just having, you know, primarily ponderosa pine with the understory of grass shrub. You know, we've got junipers intermixed in there. There's no one standard vegetation type at all. We take the primary fuel carrier, in this case, the ponderosa tree stand mixed in with, you know, a grass understory, and then we weigh those against, you know, basically the current conditions. You know, again, you know, we understand that, you know, our forests are thicker than ever. They're overgrown, but the additional things that we're trying to keep up with is, you know, is the changing weather, the fuels conditions in the where they are at in their drought, the live fuel moistures. I mean, there's a ton of different factors that go in on trying to predict fire behavior. You know, I mean, at best, we take a shotgun approach and, you know, hope that we're shooting in the right direction of, you know, of how we try to tackle some of this stuff. I don't know if that exactly answers your question. You know, the current fuel modeling stuff it's a good start, but by no means is it bomb-proof or foolproof. So.
Thank you.
Maya, if
yeah.
I could just add just a little bit about the fire models too, is that, you know, most of the fire modeling that we use to help inform the decisions that we're making in terms of fighting a wildland fire that's going into extended attack and going on for several days, that's all based on historical data. So when we are getting into conditions that are breaking records, whether it's high temperatures, it's low RH, it's really high wind speeds, when we're breaking those historical records, our models cannot model for that. It's, you know, we have to, the scientists behind the models have to recalibrate the data, recalibrate the model to try to get us to something that we are actually seeing on the landscape. And that was happening a lot this summer, especially on our larger fires like Cameron Peak, East Troublesome, Williams Fork. They were constantly recalibrating because they would run a model and it would show, you know, maybe 1, 2, 3, 5% likelihood of it going to this spot on the ground. And then that's what we would see. And so it just kept reinforcing that we were outside of historical norms and our models couldn't really effectively model for that. And we were having to do a lot of manipulation there.
Thanks, Angie. It looks like there's some questions and comments interspersed in the chat looking for additional data, maybe overlaying burn severity maps with weather data and websites for satellite images. And I'm wondering if any of you just have, well, maybe one, know if bear maps are public at any point, and also if there's any resources or websites that you would recommend to look at the burn area or gather more data. And I'll definitely try and send some of that out afterwards as well. One of them particularly asked for anything about that show ember storms. So there's a few questions in there. If nobody has anything to add there, I will do some research and send it out with the resource list to everybody after this.
I don't know about ember washes, but there's I was sent a pretty cool video on YouTube from a building camera on top of one of the CU buildings showing the fire progression. It's a pretty amazing time lapse from start to, I guess, start of the fire. It took about 5 hours for the fire to, you know, completely go across North Foothills. I can try to find that link and put it in the chat. As far as the imagery, there's nothing public that I'm aware of. We use some information and data that's produced by the state, but that's typically in a password protected account. to have that, or to get that information. They have been making it more available, but I'm not sure there's a direct way to pull images directly from that software right now.
Okay. Another person is asking, when driving around mountains in Boulder County, the timber and the vegetation looks very dense and relatively inaccessible. And so considering climate change, what do the next 50 years hold for us? It's hard to predict all of that, obviously, but I mean, I would say that the fire behavior that we're seeing this year is indicating that we're moving into, it appears that we're moving into, you know, a different cycle.
I wasn't going to answer that quite directly, but wanted to just share that the part of the effort of the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership is to actually take representative areas in the watershed and work collaboratively using science to define the desired future conditions. And so that kind of gets at Michael's question. So we are, you know, trying to find these representative areas like you describe and define what we want it to look like in the future and what we're expecting considering climate change and our knowledge of what the trajectory is for our forests. So more to come on that.
I would also add is, you know, we can't treat every acre on the landscape. You know, so part of what Jesse was talking about with that group is we also want to strategically think where could treatments be more effective. And I think those are things that we might be able to learn from the fires that have occurred. But we can't, you know, some of those steep draws that are coming out of, you know, going up Boulder Canyon, we're not going to be able to do work in those locations. We have attempted to treat steep slopes, and the cost is fairly prohibitive. I mean, we've done some big projects. The last one we did at Heil was done in a rocky, steep area using helicopters because we knew we couldn't get equipment in there and we could not get the material removed, you know, if we just felled it by hand. And so I think we're trying to work at the problem from a bunch of different ways, but I do think the watershed group that's working in the St. Vrain that Jesse's heading up is an example of us trying to all come together across agencies as well, because the Forest Service is involved, we're involved, the city of Longmont, the local fire protection district. So everybody's involved trying to kind of build the projects from the ground up. So I'm hoping that we can continue that example throughout the county as well.
Thanks, Stefan. So we're getting close to 6 o'clock. I'm welcome to stay on for, you are welcome to stay on for a little bit longer if anybody wants to. Before we did leave, I just wanted to let you know that Callie has posted the survey results in the chat, and I'm gonna just share my screen real quick and show those to you. It's interesting to take a look at these in real time. Sorry, we had some issues with that in the beginning, but let's see what we found out. Have you developed an evacuation plan for future wildfires? So 85% of the respondents, only 14 respondents, we had some issues, said yes, so that's good. And then many people have taken steps to work on their properties. We did have a lot of people probably here who aren't homeowners, so can't take those steps. But this is still encouraging that people are deciding to take steps to prepare their homes for wildfire and their properties. And then what is stopping you from doing more? Time and money, which is expected too. So this will help us better understand in addition to whatever happened in the city breakout room too, you know, where we should take some next steps to help people perform more mitigation on their properties. So let me see if there's any last questions that we want to get to. I really want to thank everybody for being on here tonight, and especially all of the people from different agencies who have answered questions and shared their knowledge with us. And if I did not get to any of your questions in the chat, we do have everything recorded, and so we'll try to follow back up with people. I feel like we got to most of them, but if anyone wants to unmute themselves right now and ask something, you're free to do that as well. So thanks again for everybody being here tonight.
Thank you. Hey, can I ask a question of you guys?
Please do.
Yeah. So I'm just, it's a perspective thing. I'm thinking more broadly than just the particular fires we're talking about here. I'm thinking of the Cameron Peak and the other ones also. But I think there's a tendency to look at these things as negatives, right? Look at all the destruction, the burned trees, all this stuff, right? And obviously there are some, total negatives to the extent we have homes destroyed or people injured. Those are absolute negatives. But from the forest point of view, we have been talking for a while that this area is, behind. It has a fire debt, right? And certainly you saw that with the lower montane you were looking at, the areas where you were able to do treatments and bring things back a little bit more to the kind of conditions you would have if you had more frequent fires, things fared better, right? So I'm wondering whether we should be looking at this somewhat as a positive also, right? I mean, I look at the maps of northern Colorado and how much burned this year. That's an awful lot of fire debt that's been, in some sense, paid. We're caught up, right, in some of these areas. And obviously, there's the question of if the fire was too intense, the soil was so damaged that there won't be regen, or we have to do extra work to create regen. That can also be a negative. But I'm just curious on what the perspective of this group is on, in some sense, this is part of the natural behavior. We've been behind. We've now had a lot of burn area. I mean, is that partially a good thing that those ecosystems will recover over, longer time scales, but will be healthier? They won't be in a fire debt situation, maybe in some of the upper montane areas for another 100 years, unless, you see what I mean, right? So I just wonder whether that perspective has some merit or not, or maybe you guys can shoot it down or comment on it.
Yeah, Alex, I think there's a couple things, we can say about that. But I think the bigger piece goes back to what Jesse was talking about earlier, which is, what is our desired future condition in the forest that we're living in, and how do we get there? Now, sure, we have a big opening on the landscape. There's some other major concerns that are going to come up from this with erosion and things like that. And so obviously those are things we have to immediately address. But yeah, there's some openings on the landscape, and that's something that was lacking in the grand scheme of things. But I'd rather take it from the perspective of the forest that we still have, and how do we get to the desired future condition of not having this continue to occur on the landscape and continue to lose our forest structure? So I think it really just depends on how you look at it. So when we go and start to think about planting, and if we are going to replant and where we're going to replant, that's certainly something we're going to consider, because there's going to be locations that we say, well, that now is going to be a long-term meadow, and that's something that's going to remain on the landscape. But in terms of, I don't want to see this happen again. And if there's ways that we can do our treatments on the landscape to avoid that, I think that's what we're trying to learn from this.
And I'll add that our national strategy is to learn to live with fire, to create fire adapted communities. So we're going to have fire. We need to learn to live with that fire, to adapt. And so, not that fire, there are good fires, as we've talked about in terms of this prescribed fire and low intensity fire, but we need to prepare. So we are going to have additional fires. And so the more we can do in advance, the fewer lives that will be lost and the fewer homes that will be destroyed. So it's learning to live with fire and adapting is sort of our strategy. That's our national strategy, and that's what we're working on here locally to prepare.
Yeah, I'll echo into that. Alex, I totally agree with you. fire doesn't have to be a bad thing. I just, I think it's we want to try to control the intensity of it. The landscape will absolutely recover. I have no doubt that it will, but it may be on a fairly long time frame that it does. Fires are basically a response to a problem that we saw 20, 30 years ago when we saw the beetle kill go through Colorado. What happened over at East Troublesome, was fire burning up a lot of beetle kill trees. It just did it in a way that, is going to make recovery a lot harder. So.
All right, thanks everybody. Really appreciate all your time and appreciate you all being here. And looking forward to more conversations like this. So have a good night.
You too, thank you.
Thanks.